Welcome, students, to another exciting journey into India's colonial history. Last class, we explored the Pitt's India Act of 1784, which was like the British Parliament's first attempt to rein in the East India Company, a powerful merchant turned ruler by introducing the Board of Control to oversee its action in India. Think of it, it's and the first lease of a mighty dragon. Today, we will dive into the Charter Act of 1813, 1833, and 1853. Three landmark laws that transformed the company role, opened doors to free trade, education, and governance reforms, and planted seeds for India's modern history. These acts as a chapter in a grand story of change where commerce, culture, and ideals collided, sparking reforms that inspired legends like Raja Ram Mohan Roy and Dadabhai Naoroji. Let's reveal how these acts reshaped India and fueled it dreams of freedom. Imagine, it's the early 19th century, and the East India Company is like a powerful merchant king ruling over the vast Indian territories through trade, tricks, and battles. But here an interesting fact in 1813, a storm was brewing in Britain. Parliament was fed up with the company exclusive grip on Indian trade, which was like a greedy dragon hoarding treasures inspired by free trade ideas from thinkers like Adam Smith. They passed the Charter Act of 1813, opening doors for more competition and even missionaries. This act directly sparked the spirit of Western education in India, leading to legends like Raja Ram Mohan Roy challenging old customs. It's like unlocking a teaser chest that mixed commerce, culture, and change. The Charter Act of 1813 was a key law passed by British Parliament to renew the East India Company Charter for another 20 years. It marks a shift in British policy towards India, focusing on trade, education, and religion. Here's a simple breakdown. First, end of trade monopoly. In Charter Act of 1813, end of trade monopoly, that is first point. Okay, the act ended the company exclusive right to trade with India's expat for tea and trade with China. This allowed other British merchants to enter the Indian market, promoting free trade and reducing the company power. Okay, एक्ट ने कंपनी के भारत के साथ व्यापार के विशेष अधिकार को समाप्त कर दिया। चाय और चीनी के साथ व्यापार को छोड़कर इससे अन्य ब्रिटिश व्यापारियों को भारतीय बाजार में प्रवेश मिला। मुक्त व्यापार को बढ़ावा मिला और कंपनी की शक्ति कम हुई। नाउ द सेकेंड इज सपोर्ट फॉर एजुकेशन। ओके, शिक्षा के लिए समर्थन। फॉर द फर्स्ट टाइम द ब्रिटिश गवर्नमेंट allocated rupees 1 lakh annually for the education of Indians. This was a small but important step towards spreading Western education and science in India. Now the third is entry of missionaries. The act permitted Christian missionaries to come to India and preach. This led to cultural exchange but also controversies over conversation. Now the fourth is a strengthened control. A strengthened control. The increased British government oversight on the company through the Board of Control, ensuring more accountability. Now, the fifth is territorial sovereignty. Kshetriya Samprabhuta. The act affected to company control over Indian territories, treating them as a British possessions. In simple terms, this act was like losing the company tight on the Indias, allowing new ideas and people to flow in, which later influenced India's freedom struggle. As we wrap up this note, remember the fascinating tales of how a single act in 1830 planted seeds for modern India. From bursting markets on enlightenment, minds that fueled reformers like Vivekanand, it's a reminder that history is not just dates, it's stories of transformation. It's 1833, and the East India Company, once a mighty trading giant, is losing its shine. The British Parliament, like a strict present dictates it's time for big change. Here, fun fact, the Charter Act of 1833 was not just about trade, it was a bold step that reshaped India's governance and planted the seeds for modern administration. Think of it like a blockbuster movie where a young reformer, Lord Macaulay, enters the scenes dreaming of education Indians in English to create a new class of thinkers. This act was not just paperwork, it's a game changer, sticking to debates and dream that encouraged India's freedom struggle. The Charter Act of 1833 was a landmark legislation by the British Parliament that reduced the East India Company charter but transformed its rules and India's governance. Now, the first point in Charter Act of 1833, end of commercial monopoly. End of commercial monopoly. The act completely ended the East India Company trade monopoly, turning into an administration body. The company could no longer trade, focusing only on governing the Indian territory. Understood? Now, the second is centralized governance. The second is centralized governance. It created the office of the Governor General of India, not just Bengal, giving them supreme authority over all British territory in India. Lord William Bentinck became the first Governor General of India. Now, the third is Law Commission. Understood? This act established a law commission to codify Indian laws, leading to a more uniform legal system. This was a step towards modern governance. Now, the fourth is education and English. The act emphasized Western education with Lord Macaulay later pushing for English as the medium of instruction. Okay, this aimed to create a class of Indians education and British system to assist in administration. Now, the fifth is abolition of slavery. Fifth is abolition of slavery. The act took steps to abolish slavery in India, aligning with global anti-slavery movement. Through implementation was gradual. Now, the sixth and the last point is Indian representation. It allowed Indians to appointed to higher administration posts. A small but significant step towards inclusion, through limited in practice. Now, the significance of Charter Act of 1833. The Charter Act of 1833 shifted the company role from trade to governance, laying the foundation for centralized British rule in India. It also sparked education reforms that influenced thinkers like Raja Mohan Roy, shaping India's modern history. As we close this note, think about how the Charter Act of 1833 was like a spark that lit up India's path to modernity, from ending the company trade empire to legitimizing dreams of education and reform. Remember, this act paved the way for English education. Indians who later challenged British rule like a plot twist in history. Now we will step into the 1853, when the British East India Company rule over the India was like a giant ship sailing through storm seas, facing questions about its future. Here, the Charter Act of 1853 was large of its kind, as it set the image for the British Crown to take direct control just a few years later after the 1857 revolt. Imagine a dramatic tale where this act was like a wise old sage, tried to fix the company flaws by introducing reforms that encroached in India administration history. It's a kind of a story of turning point that saved modern India, with whisper of change that inspired leaders like Dadabhai Naoroji to dream big. The Charter Act of 1853 was the final legislation by the British Parliament to renew the East India Company Charter, passed the backdrop of growing dissatisfaction with the company rule. It introduced key administrative reforms. In Charter Act of 1853, there is first point, open-ended charter. In open-ended charter, unlike previous chapter with a 20 years term, this act did not set an expiry date for the company rule, leaving it open until Parliament decided overseas. Now the second is Indian Civil Services. Indian Civil Services, the act introduced a competitive examination system for recruiting civil servants, opening the Indian Civil Services ICS to merit-based candidates, including Indians, through access was limited in practice. Now the third is separation of power. It separated the legislative and executive functions of the Governor General Councils, creating a legislative councils with more members, including Indians representatives, to make laws. Now the fourth is expansions of Governor General Councils. The fourth is expansions of Governor General Councils. The council was expanded to include six additional members, including representatives from provinces to improve decision making. Now, the fifth is local governance. In local governance, the Act strengthened local administrative by allowing the appointment of a Lieutenant Governor of Bengal, reducing the burdens on the Governor General. Now, the last is judicial reform. In judicial reform, it laid the groundwork for codifying laws and improving the judicial system, building on the work of the Law Commission. So, the Charter Act of 1853 was a step towards modernizing British administration in India by introducing competitive exams and legislative reforms. It set the foundation for a more structured governance systems. However, it could not prevent the 1857 revolt, which led to the end of company rule. The Act's reforms indirectly inspired educated Indians to demand greater roles in governance, influencing the freedom movement. So, a student, the Charter Act of 1813, 1833, and 1853 were not just law, they were turning point in Indian history, like chapter in book of transformation from the Pitt's India Act of 1784, which first tried the British control over the East India Company to the Charter Act of 1813. Opening trade and education, the 1833 Act centralizing governance and enlightening English educations, and the 1853 Act modernizing administration. These laws reshaped India. They brought Western ideas, empowered reforms like Raja Ram Mohan Roy, Vivekanand, and Dadabhai Naoroji, and laid the groundwork for India's freedom struggle. History is just about the dates. History is just not about the dates. It's about stories of change that inspire us to dream big and shape our future. So there is one inspiring quote by Mahatma Gandhi: "Be the change you wish to see in the world. Study history to understand the past and use its lesson to build a brighter future." Thank you.